This was the day I made my first roly-poly cocoons. I'm just kidding, they're croissants, but I mean, look at them. They definitely look a little bit like a bug to me, or a species of sorts. Anyways, they were delicious. I have never had a homemade croissant before, and now I'm questioning all of my life choices. So I'm just gonna give you guys a quick rundown of the recipe I used, how it was for me making them the first time, and some of the things that I learned along the way. I used the Claire Saffitz recipe, and I will say if you follow it to a T, you will not be disappointed. But let's just start with the things that I messed up. I started straight away with mistake number one being that the recipe called for unsalted butter, and I used salted butter. Most of the time, they can be pretty interchangeable with recipes, but when you're dealing with a dough as delicate as this, I would not suggest it. Otherwise, if your butter is too warm, you can risk having the butter just melt completely out of your dough before it's done baking, because salted butter actually has a lower melting point than unsalted butter. So if you're using salted, you just need to really be aware of the temperature and how you're handling your dough. As for me, that's exactly what I did. I was a little overly cautious, actually. I was religiously turning on the video and rewatching everything that she was saying 600 times over the entire process to make sure I wasn't doing anything wrong. Don't be as hyper fixated on it as I was. You can relax a little bit, because now that I've done it, I realize it's really not as bad as I thought it was going to be. I really had the pressure on myself because people made it seem like this is so difficult. And is it time consuming? Yes. Is it something that is super hard? I would not say so. Okay, back to the croissants. So something I'm definitely going to recommend to you guys is getting yourself a wooden rolling pin. That's what she has in her video. As you can see here, I'm using a marble rolling pin, which is really great for keeping dough cold, but you have to beat your dough, and you cannot do that with a rolling pin with handles or with a marble rolling pin because it's too heavy. And she doesn't necessarily note that in the video, but make sure you have something like a French rolling pin or a rolling pin that doesn't have handles so that you can beat it properly. Otherwise, you'll wind up like me, using a child's rolling pin to get the job done. I also recommend being distraction free.
Zaria! Oh no, honey, no! Oh!
This is amazing. I can't work.
Yeah, because you're doing it with your hands, honey.
Or you could wind up with something like that mess that I had with my children. I would suggest doing a project like this where you have help with your kids if you have kids, or just clearing your schedule, making sure you have no prior arrangements made, because this does take a lot of your attention for essentially a whole day and a half. You'll have lots of time in between the different waiting stages on your dough, but I still wouldn't risk leaving your house and going to do something big, because you want to be able to keep an eye on it. During the first initial bulk rise of my dough, mine rose way faster than hers did. I think she said something like 4-ish hours, and mine was like ready to go in an hour and a half. So you don't just want to step away, because it's all going to vary depending on the temperature of your house. Now, there are a few things you're going to want to note that Claire guides you through with care, such as not pressing down on your dough when you're rolling it out. Otherwise, there's the possibility of blending the butter and the dough together. And if you do that, they will not be laying on each other like sheets, which are what create those flaky layers. I actually wound up pressing down only out of my own impatience, because I didn't have a wooden rolling pin, and I was using, as you saw, my child's rolling pin, which made the beating process so much slower. The next thing I recommend is that when you're ready to put your dough in overnight, you do not put it on the bottom shelf, put it on the top shelf. As you saw, mine had a bubble in it, and it actually puffed up quite a lot, I think more than it was supposed to. And that happened because the fridge is not quite as cold on the bottom, it's coldest at the top. So I would definitely suggest you do that. I also highly recommend that you come prepared with a ruler with a straight edge of sorts. I did not have one, so the best two things I could find for this was a tape measure that belonged to my husband and a parchment paper box. To make your croissants as even as possible, you want every edge to be as straight as you can get it. You can still make them without doing this, without wasting the dough if you don't want. I just gave the extra dough to my daughter to play with, but if you don't want to waste, feel free to leave the edges. They just won't be exactly the same size or have really nice pristine edges. This part was the most fun, rolling up the croissants. It was just so satisfying. I don't know, something about it was completely therapeutic, and I could honestly roll up a croissant all day for the rest of my life. And then you will wind up with this adorable little tray of roly-polies. This is why I love baking, you guys. Look at them. They're so cute. Anyways, this next step is going in with the egg wash. This part actually stressed me out so much because she specifically notes not to get the edges wet so as not to seal those layers that you have made. So this literally took me forever because you need a small brush to do this, and I did not have one. And I also recommend one that's not silicone like this. Once they were ready to go in the oven, I just chronically stressed the entire time because my oven light was broken and I couldn't check on them. And I thought the butter was going to melt out due to my salted butter incident in the beginning. But look at them, you guys. They turned out amazing. For my first go at it, I think they turned out great. They're not Baking World elite quality, and there are definitely some tweaks I can do for the future, but they were so good, you guys. Now, what are you still doing here? Go make these.